sponsor of the MIT Enterprise Forum, which we've loved doing for the last 10 years or so. And I'm happy to be involved. I've been involved for the last year and a half or so. And we love putting on and sponsoring programs like this one. We hope to be back in person in the Kenobi offices sometime soon. With that, I'll pass the mic to Joe Carangelo.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm Joe Carangelo. I'm the President and Chapter Chair of the Enterprise Forum of San Diego. Hey, Jay, could you put up the slide for our wonderful sponsors? I want to recognize our sponsors as I'm welcoming our speakers, our panelists, and our guests. But we can do, since the past 40, 45 years, the Enterprise Forum of San Diego has brought content that has been timely, intriguing, and powerful, and I think tonight is no exception. But we can't do that without our wonderful, wonderful sponsors. You've heard from Ben from Kenobi Martin, the Farrell Family Foundation, Merrill Lynch, a Bank of America company, BDO, which is a national, if not worldwide, accountancy, and then, when we are together, we love the French Gourmet, and Green Rope is our CRM. Jay, I think I have a few slides. Could you put them up, please? We have a real treat for you tonight. We have a case study. Edna.life case study works at the convergence of blockchain and whole genome sequencing. And we are privileged to have Greg Simpson, the CEO and founder, to go over his business plan and the genesis of his company and how he got from point A to point B and where he hopes to go in the future. Next slide, please, Jay. The case study ground rules are, as usual, our panelists, and I'll introduce them, act as the helpful board, posing questions to seek clarification. If anyone in the audience has a question, given what they hear, please pose it in the chat. We will be moderating it. The moderator, and I guess that's me, will pause the presentation to give Greg a chance to catch his breath, but also to interject any question, and the panelists have the opportunity to pose theirs at that time. The final few minutes we like to reserve for the board's final thoughts, any final guidance, and take-home messages of what they've heard for Edna and for the audience. And the bonus feature tonight, Greg has agreed to stay on after the formal event to entertain any questions on blockchain or cryptocurrencies. And I know I have them, but and you probably have them as well. Jay, next slide. I'd like to introduce the first of our panelists. Kimberly Normoyle is a principal at Exec HQ Alliance. Kimberly is a registered CPA in Vancouver, Canada, with over 11 years of experience in accounting advocacy, inclusive of technology, engineering, and product development, supporting business internationally to add value, and when they're at a certain stage, when they need a certain amount of funding. And Kimberly provides guidance to those technology entrepreneurs with her network of high net worth and ultra high net worth investors. So Kimberly is certainly someone she'd want to know. She works at various stages of financing, from seed funding, connecting with her network. Jay, next slide. Mike Stokan is the founding and the past chair of the Personalized Medicine Division of the American Association of Clinical Chemistry. I've known Mike for, I think we started to count the years, and we stopped at about 10 or 15 or so. And Mike's career has been dedicated to advancing the field of personalized medicine, currently serving on a number of several boards and a frequent guest lecturer on management, innovation, and entrepreneurship at North Carolina State University, as well as other. He founded his own consulting firm, Personalized Medicine Partners, to provide global strategic and business operational capabilities for the ecosystem that works in personalized medicine. In his industry career previous to Personalized Medicine Partners, he's worked with GlaxoSmithKline, Organon, and Organon Technica. He has a dual BS degree in biochemistry and microbiology from North Carolina State University, with a minor in genetics and a master's in biotech management. Jay, please. Greg Simpson. And after this, Greg, we're going to roll it over to you and your presentation. Is a serial entrepreneur and former senior principal engineer at Oracle. He's the founder and presently the CEO at Edna, who's working, as we've stated, at the convergence of blockchain technologies and whole genome sequencing. And we welcome Kimberly, Greg, and Mike to our panel this morning, this evening, I'm sorry. And Greg, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay. Wow. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, everyone. I feel very humbled to be allowed to talk to you guys this evening and this afternoon about Oracle. I do have some slides. I'm going to attempt to share those now. Is it working? Do you see us?
Yes, I do. I see your slides. They're not in
Yes,
full
but-
screen,
okay.
though.
Oh.
They're not in slideshow, Greg.
Yeah.
I think I shared the wrong thing. How about now?
That's perfect.
Oh, great. Okay, so my name is Greg Simpson. I'm as Joe said, the founder and CEO of Edna Inc. We're a Wyoming C Corp, and we do work in genetic sequencing on whole genomes, whole human genomes at present. My background is chiefly, I'm a self-taught programmer. I taught myself to code computers in the early 80s and opened a firm that eventually got bought by another firm that got bought by Oracle, and I ended up an Oracle employee for a couple decades, almost 17 years. And during that time, I was in charge of the SWAT team, which was our critical accounts reactionary force when a major ERP system went down for one of our big time customers. We would either throw myself or one of my team on a plane and go fix the problem. And these were usually very pressurized, heated failures. So I'm no stranger to pressure. Of course, this is founding a company is a different sort of pressure. But enough about me. We are a Wyoming C Corp too. I thought I'd mention that. We're in the business of those sample tubes. We send out those sample tubes, you spit in the tube. We turn the saliva to DNA and DNA to data. And then we don't actually issue reports. This is the industry sort of what people think of when they think of whole genome sequencers, what they do. And the reality is this is not how the industry operates. There's a very hidden sort of business model, which you're going to see on the next slide, that's what's actually occurring. And what's actually occurring is you get to find out how Neanderthal you are, and the company that farms your data sells it to research, and we estimate about $70,000 is the value that they're collecting per your spit. That's based on a $250 average sale price, and we estimate that it's been sold 300 times per sample. And we interviewed about 80 researchers, and they paid different prices depending upon the type of company they were. If the researcher was employed by a big biopharma company, they would pay a lot more. The universities and hospitals that were doing research were more dependent on their funding and definitely paid a little less. But they all agreed that my estimation of what the marketplace is correct. 201, they told me, yeah, you're probably in the ballpark at 70 grand. So I think that should be shocking to most people. I mean, we know Facebook sells our data and they make their living off of our information. What we probably haven't realized is that our genetic information is as valuable as it is. So we want to solve that problem. We want to solve that problem of that $70,000 gone missing from your checking account where it should be for the consumer. The genetic researcher also has a problem, and it's basically the amount of data it takes to actually draw conclusions about DNA. And universally, all those 80 plus researchers that we spoke to said we need more and better quality data. And so that's the second problem that Edna is architected to solve. So our solution is that we won't issue any reports because the FDA limits that data so severely. The NCI database has over 49,000 genetic variants that are pathogenic listed. And pathogenic, most of you probably know that word means capable of causing disease or known to cause disease. So 49,000, and the FDA allows you to know about exactly 10 in a direct-to-consumer report. So reports are pretty useless when you look at 0.002% of the information. And they're also misleading. You may think that you don't have cancer, but your DNA is, sorry, you may not be predisposed to ALS or some severe disease like that because you read your report and your DNA the report didn't say anything about it. Well, it wasn't allowed to tell you about it. So we do it another way, and you'll see it on the next slide when I talk about our business model. But we do saliva to DNA to data, and at data, we stop. At that point, we basically hand the blockchain over to you as a consumer, and you retain control, complete control, and the only copy of your DNA. You can work with genetic counselors to get health information, or you can monetize your data and turn it into an asset and create wealth. And there's some pretty cool things, I think, that around the wealth cycle that we'll cover in a bit. So our business model, our go-to-market strategy involves getting together with patient advocates. We feel that they're the best way to get introductions to researchers and patients. And we call patients our motivated consumers. They're the ones that have potentially a life and death situation going on, or a family member, a loved one, may be facing a life and death situation. So they're definitely the motivated ones as compared to people who want to know how Italian or Neanderthal they are. The core of our business model is data goes to the researcher from the patient, and money flows back from the researcher to the patient. Our system and our code, our software, doesn't preclude patients from donating to causes they feel strongly about and want to help these researchers advance the knowledge. The two other people that are involved here are the genetic counselors, the stakeholders, if you will, and they offer services. They actually are able to go in and tell you about all the situations that might be involved with your personal genetic variants. And they do collect fees, and we charge a fee to those genetic counselors to operate on our platform and collect customers for themselves. The other player is pretty interesting. He's a micro loan investor. If the patient can't afford his data to get his genome run, and it's not cheap, it's much, much cheaper than it was just a few years ago, but it still isn't something that people would necessarily all be able to afford. The loan is made to the patient or the consumer so that he can go dig up his data. What I like to picture this as is the lender is giving the patient or the consumer a shovel to dig up the gold in his front yard. And inside the Edna architecture, that investor, the guy who bought the shovel, is entitled to get 2 shovels back. So he will actually take proceeds through our smart contract, which no one has to stand over and decide. The code is how this functions. The code makes the choice. And that's a benefit of blockchain, that once it's coded, it will just continue to run and it will do things fair. and also with a sort of a immutable, which I'll talk a little bit later about blockchain, why it's immutable. It's the design and the agreement that's made in the front end is always carried out through the back end, and it can't be changed once both parties agree to the contract. That's why it's called a smart contract. So that investor gets 2 shovels back, and now he can go help 2 patients, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16, and you guys get the deal. It's an exponential growth factor for both that investor's profits as well as his reach into actually doing something about a particular disease if he's that sort of a philanthropist. So that's how Aetna functions, and that's pretty much all the parties involved. The next slide is our 3 products and what we were doing with them. The DNA Advantage is Aetna's sequencing product, and you basically sign up for it. We send you a collection kit, you spit in the tube, we run it through our sequencer, and then put it on the blockchain for you and your genetic counselor to work through your personal health information. The DNA Marketplace is that connection with the researcher. It's where the researcher makes an offer, says, hey, anybody with ALS, I want to do, I've got some funding, I want to do a new project, I'd like to buy some people's DNA with access to their data, rather, and I'm willing to spend this much per sample. The researcher doesn't get the sample, he gets the data. And the reason for that is we can do it much more efficiently than most of the researchers we've talked to. What they've told us is they're spending 75% of their budget getting to the data that they want to study. And that's pretty significant. And I think that there's a lot of inefficiencies if they're trying to do both the sequencing and the study of the data. This lets them focus their funding on the study of the data. Also, it's a free marketplace. That we chose that word intentionally because the researcher can make an offer of 30 cents for your genome. And if you want to take it, you get the money. And if you don't care to do the deal at that rate, you don't. And so it's a free market, and that will help establish the true market value of DNA as a asset.
Hey, Greg.
The last part is yeah.
Greg, we have a question in, and just to confirm, you're collecting or you're sequencing the whole genome, correct?
That's correct. We don't do any tests. We won't go for a specific, we're going to do an end-to-end genome. And I have some really exciting news to talk to on my second to last slide, I think it is, about the exact product that we create for those researchers. I think you're going to be blown away. I'm blown away. There was a change in March, and a very significant one. So significant, I would almost call it 4th gen sequencing. Currently, we're calling it 3rd gen, which is really what it is. But you'll see it when I get to that slide. So hold your question and revisit it if you want to ask more, if I haven't answered it. Are we good?
Greg, just
Yes,
one
please.
clarifying question on Joe's question. So when you say whole genome, will you be talking more about that at the end of the presentation when you talk about your exciting?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, I sure will. And so the DNA economy is the where a philanthropist or an investor could make a very huge impact. We have boots on the ground. Excuse me. We have boots on the ground in some pretty heavy duty poverty areas, and we intend to make it possible for these 2 kids to dig up the gold that's in their spit. We'll talk a little bit more about that further along as well. So those are products. Blockchain. I have to address the elephant in the room. Why does Aetna need a blockchain? Every single company wants to claim that they're doing something on the blockchain, but we actually have a use case for it. What is a blockchain? It's an accounting ledger. That's all it is. It's your accountant's green papers where he writes down transactions and he keeps a record of it. there's a couple differences and advantages to an electronic or DLT, digital ledger technology, which is another word for blockchain. It's decentralized and duplicated, which means that if I write down in my ledger, I owe Joe $100 or I paid Joe $100, it's suddenly copied to hundreds, dozens, thousands of computers around the world, depending upon how many block producers are functioning on that network. And so my ledger is duplicated, but it's also immutable. It's written in ink. Once the chain agrees that this transaction occurred, that Greg sent Joe $100, it can't be changed. And it's never been hacked, contrary to popular belief that, oh, Mt. Gox got hacked. Yes, they did, but it wasn't the blockchain that got hacked. It was their storage facility that was a regular Oracle database, actually. It's encrypted or transparent. If there's areas where personal information, like HIPAA information, it needs to get on the blockchain to be stored, it can be encrypted before it goes on there. And the neat part about it is the encryption is built in so that only the key can decrypt it, and only the owner's key once it's put in what I like to think of as a safety deposit box. So if we all have an account on the blockchain, we all actually have a safety deposit box, but it's different. The bank doesn't have a key. There's no banker. It's all in code. And only your key is the one that can unlock that box. Unfortunately, there have been people that have lost money in the blockchain because they lost their key. And there's no replacement. There's no banker to turn to and say, hey, give me a new key. It's my box, actually. And they're getting better. There are some newer chains that allow you to recover keys by going through the same process you would go through at a bank, which is the KYC AML process, where they figure out, you show them your ID, you give them a signature card, you give them a thumbprint on your iPhone and a Face ID. But so that's what a blockchain is. And why a blockchain is privacy. Why Aetna wants one is privacy and security. That safe deposit box is where you should keep something worth $70,000. You shouldn't keep that in your iPhone, where if you drop it in the lake, it's gone forever. That value also can be monetized while it's on the blockchain. You can essentially unlock your safety deposit box, let that researcher go in and look at what he wants to look at, and then leave, and then you relock it again. And Aetna has some proprietary code that actually keeps tabs on how honest that researcher is being about, keeping your data, and not abusing that privilege that he got to look at it. So we also get escrow services, which is very important. We want our deals to be fair. Once an offer is made and accepted, the escrow can manage the execution of the whole deal and distribute the funds when it's appropriate. We also can serve the unbanked. The ability for the blockchain and cryptocurrencies to reach into places that have no banks, yet they're covered in iPhones. And so that just enables so much greater participation in the Aetna business that we cannot ignore it. It just can't. And it's an open market. The blockchain is very visible. When a transaction occurs, when somebody, a researcher buys DNA from someone, that transaction is easily made public. And we want that sort of thing to be public. We don't want it to be encrypted and hidden away so that no one really knows the value of the DNA. And the other researchers don't know what people are willing to pay for it, competitors of theirs. We also have, with a blockchain, the ability to do DeFi, which is distributed finance. It's that investor component where he can step in and say, hey, I want to micro fund 10 genomes in Africa or Brazil. Get me kids that are being kidnapped in Brazil and sold into human trafficking. Go into a village in Africa and take 1,000 kids into the church and sequence 100 of them. So the traffickers have to leave that village alone because there's a potential of getting caught at the border. And yes, we have ties to several countries now in Africa. The governments are very keen to have us move in there and start doing this. It's also a trustless transaction. When you interact on the blockchain and you do a transaction on the blockchain, you don't have to trust your banker to unlock your money. It's your money. You have control. You have the only key. Same with your data. No one is a custodian of your data. The code is custodian of your data, and it can't be changed. It can't be messed with or monkeyed with. And you have to trust no one other than the code. If you can read the code, and most people can't, but most people can easily read the contract that is published alongside the code that says exactly the intent of each thing that the code is capable of doing. And that's a Ricardian contract is the name for that. So the whole genome sequencing market, this slide never fails to amaze me. If you look at the blue slide, the cost per human genome to get a whole genome sequence back in 2001 was $100 million. You literally needed roomfuls of scientists spending months to actually extract an entire human genome. And the Moore's law is the white line. And we think of computer technology as being accelerant. Well, this is far exceeding the pace of Moore's law in terms of how cheap it's getting. And now you can see that's a tenfold factor every horizontal line on that chart. And so we're down about $1,000 now for the cost of a whole human genome. So one might say, Greg, why would you start a business that is on a rapidly declining cost? And the answer is in the next chart over, which is how many human genomes will be made. And so what we have is the cost goes down, the quantity of genomes goes up. And that's ARK. If you don't know who ARK Investment is, it's a ginormous fund that's been incredibly successful in both the cryptocurrency world as well as the bio world. They project by 2024 that there'll be 60 million whole human genomes made per year. So what's our total available market? It's 7.75 billion. It's everybody on the planet. There are only 2.5 whole human genomes in existence, and 95% of those were made on older technology, meaning there's gaps in the data, there's errors in the data. It's medium quality data. First generation, I would say less than medium quality data. So what's our serviceable available market? And that's 1 million units a year. One company we could exceed that, but I think that's a realistic target for us, is to shoot for 1 million in 1 year. And that is $1 billion plus in sales. And it would be 2% of the market in 2024. And I am saying that SAM is out around 2024. It's not next year. So what about our competition? Yeah, there's a ton of it, but it's also faux competition. They're not actually producing whole genomes. They don't actually issue reports. They issue you a report in terms of how Italian you are, what kind of wine you should drink based on your DNA, which is total bunk. It's not even science, it's just bunk. But there is a service. You could sign up. You can send them a spit sample and they'll tell you what kind of wine you should have, or what kind of dog breed you should get. The two that I think are close to us, and one of those just completely failed and fell away, and we pulled away from them, and I'll explain that in a slide or two, is Full Genomes. They had some super high-end sequencing being done. It was super long read, very high quality data, and we just blew them out of the water, and I'll tell you about that in a slide or two. And the other was Veritas, which is mostly a European competitor. And they have on staff a large number of genetic counselors, and they definitely got the health aspect of it right. They run full whole human genomes on 3rd-gen technology, and they connect you directly to a genetic sequencer. Sorry, genetic sequence. I think I need a water. Thank you. A genetic counselor is what I meant to say. So the health aspect, they're definitely competitive. And as I said, when I made this slide a month and a half ago, full genomes was competitive in the data quality world. They're not anymore. So the differentiated features that Edna has is we consider it your property. Almost every one of those competitors stores that in a conventional database on their servers. If they're hacked, your data's hacked, and it's not your property. They don't necessarily, most of them, through terms of service, claim some sort of ownership to that data. They can sell it. They can sell it off to Big Pharma and trade Big Pharma a percentage of any drug that they're going to build and sell back to you. So it's not your property, and you get no property rights. You abdicate them through the terms of service. And we're big on privacy. Not all of them are. A lot of them are willing to share it with governments because they have access. And if the court says, hey, we're going to go look in your database for the Golden Gate Bridge killer, no one can stop them. Well, Edna just simply says, we don't have the data. Each individual owner, you're going to have to go subpoena them to get their data. We don't have a database. We don't have control over that data or access to it. Health information, as I said, is slightly differentiated, not fully differentiated, with Veritas doing the genetic counseling. Microloans, that's again for the consumer, it's a benefit, and we're the only one that has it. The researcher gets the highest quality data, and we'll talk about that in one more slide, and wide-ranging selectivity. One of the things the researchers have told us is that they are in some cases told to buy lots of DNA, meaning a lot, not a lot, but a lot. And they have to buy a certain number of samples, and they don't know what are in the samples, and they can't cherry pick through them. And that really hurts the academic funded researchers. It's very cost ineffective for them. They would much prefer, I want to see this variant, and I want data like that. And with Edna, the researcher can specify down to the letter the molecular position and the sequence that they want to see there, and Edna will give it up to them. The advocate doesn't exist in any of those competitors. He's not participating, but the advocate can also, instead of their current business model, which is go out and raise funding, hit up people for donations, and then, put the money into the system, into the research. And they're in a constant cycle of doing that. Now, if they take a little bit of their funding and they throw them into microloans, those loans will actually grow over time. And that becomes a source of income for those patient advocates. Same for the investor. He can now participate in the Edna thing and earn profits. Our intellectual property is pretty big. I think it's another differentiation of it, of Edna, and it's the smart contract that we've coded. We've also got compression software. The human genome is 2 gigabytes, and we invented a way to compress that data so that it's about 10 megabytes. That's the size of a picture on your iPhone. And that's, I think, a pretty stellar achievement. And I think it's going to make our competitors kind of smart a little, because the cost to store 2 gigabytes long-term times every customer you have is pretty expensive. We also have identity protection software, again, a proprietary. Multiple forensic scientists have looked at our white paper on this and said it's undefeatable. The way we're storing it, it truly does protect that individual's identity. We also have data tracking, which I alluded to a little bit earlier, that we're trying to keep the researcher honest. Almost done, guys. our go-to-market strategy is to align ourselves with groups like the American Heart Association, those patient advocates, for those introductions that you saw in our business model to both the researchers and the patients. The American Heart Association has 40 million volunteers. I can assume that they're serving that many patients as well. And they spent 4.5 billion on research. ALS.org, kind of the same thing, 100 million, 110 million in active research grants. Tens of thousands of more groups are like this. And these are our first customers, the first people we need to win over and partner with. I talked about boots on the ground in South Africa, sorry, in Africa and South America. Project Milkbox is a project we're partnered with that is run in Brazil, and it's attempting to fight human trafficking. Edna Africa is a partner company that is working in Africa to stop human trafficking there. And the rhino that you see with no horn, Wildlife Protector and Edna Africa are the same, one and the same entities or parent and daughter companies. And the reason they're the same is the drugs that they pumped into that rhino to walk up and chop off its horn with an axe are the same drugs they find in those children at the border occasionally. And what it is a paralytic. It's not even an anesthetic. The rhino isn't even asleep. He's wide awake and feels everything. But it's a cheap drug, and the cartels that are operating in both of these arenas are using those same drugs. And we have boots on the ground and ready to roll as soon as we can fund them to go start collecting samples in Africa.
Hey, Greg.
The team in
Joe
chat,
here.
yeah.
Greg, Joe
Yes,
here.
Joe.
We have a couple of questions that have come in through the chat room, and I'll give this the opportunity, a few moments for our panelists, if they have any questions, to tee them up as well. But from the chat room, and I think you've already mentioned this, does the researcher know who donated the data?
The researcher can, as a part, it's an offer and acceptance model. So the researcher may say, I want a 4-page questionnaire filled out about your family health history. And if you fill this questionnaire out, I'll agree to buy your DNA sample because Edna created it and we know the quality of it. And so it's an offer and an acceptance. So the terms are negotiated between the owner of the DNA and the researcher. Edna has no say in how those work. It's simply a free market offering. It's like up on a bulletin board, I want to buy DNA. Here's the criteria I need. Some researcher may stipulate, I need the patient's entire health record. Some researcher may say, I need absolutely zero information about this person. He's part of my control group, and all I want to know is that he's healthy and has not been diagnosed with anything serious.
Next, another question that came in, are you involved in any gene expression, such as MA-sequence data? Any gene expression studies?
I am not a researcher. I don't intend to do any research with the data. The data is, all I'm here to do is get your data on the blockchain where you control it, and then the researchers can have at you and make offers.
So you're, as you know, I like to profile it, is that you're enabling the marketplace. You're enabling the market.
We're a platform, yeah, and a sequencer.
Yeah. There was another question that came in, and I think the audience member detected a little conflict. Basically, in one slide, you claim that Edna has no access to the data, but potentially another claim is that you offer access to filtered subsets of the data. Was the audience member hearing that right? And his real question was, how can this filtering be done without some sort of Edna database?
You're asking proprietary question about proprietary information. And what I'm going to tell you is that Edna this has been vetted by multiple forensic scientists that it's undefeatable. We can actually store the data in the clear, and identity cannot be reconstructed from the data. And when we say store in the clear, we can take search criteria in to the platform from the researcher. Says he wants to see that data. And that mechanism can roll across the data in the clear, and it tags it. It tags that snippet of data, little bit of it, right? And our platform then basically, every time your client connects to the data, you open your cell phone up and you say, hey, what's going on with my Aetna? It can say, oh, you've been tagged. You have an offer. And then we tie you to that offer. In other words, they don't really get to see the whole data, which is very important in identifying a person. You need to look at every chromosome. You can't just say one chromosome. You can't just look at one chromosome and make a forensic determination about the owner of that data.
Great.
I hope
At
that
this point in
answers
time,
the
I'd like to
question.
give, at this point in time, I'd like to give Kimberly and Mike an opportunity to pose any clarifying questions that they might like to tee up, our panelists.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in initially. So Greg, you mentioned quite often, the interaction with iPhone platforms, the iOS platforms, but you don't make much mention of Android. Is it something that will be available on multiple phone systems, or is it exclusively on iPhone at the moment?
No, we'll have to go to the Android platform as well. That is much more common, especially in impoverished areas. So we can't get to the unbanked without that. Also a web platform, so that any web browser, any laptop can access the data and essentially the Aetna platform. And it's very important too that our apps be structured so that essentially they log themselves out immediately.
I was about to ask that. Yes.
A lot of these are very heavily shared precious pieces of technology in certain areas of the world. So yeah, we definitely need the auto logout to happen pretty quick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just know from my experience working with a lot of countries around the world that yes, iPhone isn't necessarily the phone that they have in their pocket or their access to technology. So that's great to hear. And then the other question that I was wondering is, when you're talking about your different products, so you have your marketplace, the advantage, and the economy. So is it my understanding that at the time that a consumer such as myself was to go and buy one of your packages for, I think you said about $1,000, is that something that is just a one-time purchase, or is there a monetization at some other interval, i.e. as new gene sequencing technology comes in and maybe they can detect more aspects of your genome as we get further ahead in our technology? Is there a way to go back and get your DNA retested without having to pay again, or is that the intention?
I don't necessarily, I think we would offer the pretty hard discount to a returning customer. And, again, we have fixed costs, and the fixed costs are what they are.
Absolutely.
As new technology comes out, we've got to be able to afford it. To allow them to perpetually get the best technology there is, I would have to say no. But I would say that we would offer a returning customer the very best discount. We'd probably do it at cost.
Right.
Because at that point, our income stream is our markup on the sequencing service. Every time a research deal is done between a consumer, there's a small markup that Aetna takes as part of operating the platform and paying for that. When you get your genetic counseling done, there's a small markup on their cost that we tack on because they're using our platform to get to the data. And these are not huge profit streams for Aetna, but when you model our profit streams out, you see that paying for sequencing is a dying profit stream. What's the expanding profit stream is lending for someone else to get their data done, as well as providing data to researchers and taking a fee off of it. That's a growing profit stream.
Right. No, absolutely.
Greg, I've
Mike,
got
any
a
comments so far?
yeah, just a couple of quick questions. First is comment. I'm assuming we're still going to get to that full genome data generation slide here shortly, so I'll hold that question back. But I'm wondering what regulatory requirements do you foresee impacting your business, if any?
There may be some crypto regulations. The blockchain itself, I don't anticipate any regulations. They've been doing direct-to-consumer DNA forever. And yes, there are some regulations there that we have to comply with, HIPAA in particular. But there are specific direct-to-consumer regulations in the US and in Europe that need compliance with, but they're nothing that are hard. Essentially, the regulations just say be a white hat, be a John Wayne, do it honestly, and don't cheat, and don't lose people's data. And I think we're in a so much better of a place to not lose people's data compared to people that are storing it in a conventional database that gets hacked every day. You know, Home Depot to the big credit union, TransUnion, whatever it got. I'm sorry, that wasn't the one that got hacked, but they are hacked. And these are supposedly some of the best, securest systems on the planet. And they're really just a terrible way to store data like this compared to blockchain.
So speaking of that data, another interesting application, if one has their sequencing data, and I happen to have sourced mine through 3 different iterations of platforms over the years, but you can often run your whole genome data or whole exome data or even any other DNA data through these apps that can then inform you about risk factors. How do you see a person who runs their sample through Edna interacting with these other platforms? Will it be essentially open, or is it unable to be open because of your security approach?
No, it's their data, and they have the one key that can reassemble the entire genome, and it's their data, it's their property. If they want to run it through any sort of third party or any, it's their property. I certainly wouldn't prevent or stand in the way of that in any way, shape, or form.
I suppose the disclaimer being, once they've done that, their data might be out there and perhaps not as secure as if they just left it with you.
I think it's fair to warn them as a consumer and say, hey, you know, your data may be being copied. Please read terms of services, which is something we as people are horrible at. No one reads it, but that's how they got the data in the first place. No one reads the terms of service. Paragraph K, page 6, 23andMe, abdication of property rights. You're entitled to nothing. We get it all. Anyway, yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
How are we doing on time, Joe? Am I running long? I feel like I'm running long.
You're fine. I think everyone's engaged. Finish up your slides, and then we'll determine the time.
2 left.
Go ahead.
So here's my team. And that's Werner, the guy in Africa. I want to point him out especially. He's such a gem of a human being, and what a heart he has, and how livid he is about making sure Edna gets it booted up and running because he needs it, and he feels his countries need it. Is Africa. He's a wildlife protector and an advocate. So the advisory board we have is a bunch of people, and some of them will be leaving us shortly, but we have some inbound as well, some new faces that will be coming aboard. Our traction is, yes, we've done whole human genome sequencing in my basement lab. That's a picture of me doing it in my fancy lab coat and one glove, flunk. By the way, I'm holding a vial of CRISPR there. It's an MSTN knockout, totally useless bit of information for you. But we verified the data quality and out of the basement lab, sent it back to Oxford Nanopore to have it reviewed, and they certified it that it was definitely we did it right. Our smart contract is live on a blockchain. We've done tons of interviews and surveys, both patient advocates, researchers, and just regular folks who are interested in getting their DNA done. We have 9,700 consumers that know we exist and are participating with us on one level or another. And we have 3,380 that have actually reached out and said they will sign up for the product as soon as it's available. We also are a UX block producer on the UX blockchain. We'll talk about that later. Here's the slide you've all been waiting for. We have two choices when you get yourself sequenced: Aurora and Avalon. Aurora costs you $5.99. We run you through the Oxford Nanopore long read technology, and you can see some statistics there. It's run against the GRCH38. It does all 24 chromosomes. It's got some gaps in it because it is not the razor edge of technology. And down there, when we get to how long it is, 2.9 billion base pair, 161.4 million are ends in the standard GRCH38 aligned genome. And what those ends are is unknowns. The GRCH38 is not polished. When President Clinton said many years ago that the human genome has been sequenced, he was right, but it wasn't polished. There were still lots of gaps in it, and particularly around the ends of the DNA, the telomeres and the centromeres in the center of the X. Those areas are hard to read. They're very repetitive, and they have issues in terms of errors. The neat part about Oxford Nanopore is you can get up to 4 million base pairs in one string. And as you see, the DNA gets unraveled. If you can, I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer, but I'm pointing at this little thing in the center of the upper picture, upper left. It gets dragged down through that little tiny nanopore. And what Oxford Nanopore is doing is an A, C, T, and G all have different electrical resistances. So it's reading the resistance and therefore deciding what molecule is at that exact position. The instrument's pretty powerful and scalable. We can do 41,400 some samples per year per instrument. And so that's the Aurora. The Avalon is the flagship package. We're going to run your DNA through the Oxford Nanopore machine, and then we're going to run it through a PacBio Sequel II machine. And what Sequel II is really good at is getting the exact data correct in terms of shorter strings, but it gets it to a high degree of accuracy. And in their how it works is it's very atypical to have a repeated error. So the errors tend to wash out when you stack them, when you stack the reads up. We've read it 30 times and you stack all those reads up. Well, the 3 errors that occurred at that area just get washed out against the 27 others. And the Oxford Nanopore provide the really long strings that allow us to put the data in the right order overall as a puzzle. When you align the two, this is what you get. The T2T consortium is telomere to telomere, and what they have published is the CHM13, which is the equivalent of the old GRCH38. And you see their stats. They haven't completed the Y chromosome. This was just published in March of this year. That's how fresh off the press it is. When we look at the 161.4 unknowns, ends that I spoke of, it's down to 11.5 ends. This is going to be super high quality data that every researcher would die to get their hands on it. I mean, just look at how much of the genome is understood that wasn't understood. Nearly it's just amazing that I call this Gen 4. It's a huge leap forward. The problem is it doesn't quite scale yet, and PacBio is working on it. I spoke to them 2 weeks ago at length about this system, and their Q70 is also the super, super high quality data. That's a term sequencing people will understand.
Have you guys seen like a
Whoever's speaking, I really can't hear you. Could you try again?
No, no, my apologies. That's my end. I'll just mute myself for a
Oh.
second.
No worries. So yeah, the T2T is definitely a major advance. I think if an Aetna customer were to pay for that service, they would see their money back pretty quickly because researchers would be falling over themselves to get it. And so this is my final slide. In summary, the takeaways that I'd like you to get is that our stakeholders, a lot of them didn't exist really. Researchers and consumers, they weren't really a stakeholder in this game. They were a product. The genetic counselors, advocacy groups, and DNA asset investors are new. Our income streams include sequencing service, data sales fees. So when a researcher buys, we collect a fee, genetic counselor fees, investor pool fees. If an investor is going to take a profit off of our platform, we'll charge them a small fee as well. And block production, it's a way to produce income for Aetna. Third generation or better data quality, I think, is probably one of our flagship features. The hidden blockchain. No one is going to need to know what a blockchain is in order to do Aetna. They're going to interact with an app on an iPhone, on an iPad, on the web. Our smart contract creates distributed, transparent, immutable agreements. Escrow and encryption services. We have strong consumer traction. There's $70,000 in everyone's mouth, and 2% of that market in 2024 is $1 billion. We also are the only sequencing service that I know of that allows one to invest in others' DNA and help fight poverty. I did it. What time is it?
Yeah, don't
5
worry about
o'clock on the
time.
nose.
We're getting some wonderful questions. You know, one that's come up as both a consumer and someone with a genetic analysis capability. Can the consumer look at his own genome without paying an additional fee? Is that
Yes.
possible?
It's your data. It's your data. We sequence your data. We turn your saliva to data. Okay. We put the data on a blockchain. You should think of this as in a bank vault in a safety deposit box. We give you the key, and you're the only one with the key. So yeah, you can look at it. You can take it out and print it out. Of course, you would need 6 library cards of full of books to print it out.
Understood. Hey, Greg, I know you're a startup, and startups always need funding. Could you share with the group where you are on your funding and where you're looking for the next tranche of investment, and how much you're looking for? Your projections.
Yeah, this is actually another good answer to that. The financial milestones, we've been self-funded, friends and family, to the tune of about 600K, a little higher than that actually. And we're currently in a funding round for 2.4 million to go into mass production. That would result in 3,400 genomes on chain and a full-blown proof of marketplace, meaning the researchers have gone in and established for us what the cost of or the value of a DNA is. The exit for this round would be a Series A, and we are already talking with folks that are going to help us do the Series A, which would give them those early, we call it fundraising 2. That would give them an exit plan. So that's where we are and where we're headed.
And the initial use of those funds would be the establishment of a CLIA-based lab? This would
Correct.
be a CLIA-based lab.
It would be a CLIA-based lab, but it would also include a certain number of genomes that would be prepaid, and those investors would then hold stock in that DNA. They would in fact be providing the shovels. So there is some portion of that 2.4 is just going to prepay materials so that we can stock them. As I pointed out, we have 3380 in line to get sequenced, and those people are paying customers that think it's going to cost $1,400. not 800 and change.
Understood.
Rather than just simply open the doors and start taking pre-orders, I'm concerned that we won't ramp up fast enough to keep those people satisfied. Hey, Ed and I spent my money on your sequencing 3 months, 3, 4, 6 months ago. Where's my data? And so having the funding and the consumables in the lab in advance of offering it for sale puts us at a huge advantage to actually service these customers, make them happy, and get to the bottom line, which is what's your DNA worth.
I want to respect where we are with respect to time. And so Kimberly and Mike, any other questions and or take-home messages or guidance for Greg?
I do have another question. So I know that you seem to be showing on that graph that by the middle of 2021, you hope to ramp up to mass production. And I know that we're nearing very close to midpoint of the year. And so what do you think is the potential timeline to going live? And what are your challenges in getting to that point? And how are you overcoming those?
The challenges currently are the funding for the lab.
Mhm.
The building of the blockchain and the code there is no challenge at all. It's 90% written, and it really only needs some testing. We had thought about outsourcing the lab, but then we feel that that's a violation of the core principles of Edna, is that we're going to keep track of your data. We're going to protect you as a consumer from the wolves out there that want your data. So yeah, that's been the challenge. The number one challenge is raising those funds to spin up the lab. There are great consulting service that we've spoken with that can basically steps in and does all the paperwork for us, does all the meetings with the inspectors and gets us all certified. And we have high confidence in them. They've been doing that kind of service for years. So there's really nothing standing in our way. And we also are very fortunate to have a tremendous biotechnology department at the University of Wisconsin, just an hour south of us. Lots of grad students available to come into our lab and do the grunt work, if you will. Of course, I like it too. It's like, I can teach anybody who can mix a good cocktail to sequence DNA. It's not that hard. You just follow the steps on the paper. Get one of these squeezy things, I think they call it a pipette, and you squeeze it in,
exactly.
you put it out, done. Yeah.
And so the 2.4 that you're currently raising, that would last you for how long before you need to go out for your Series A round?
We think that we're going to start the Series A 18 months after the 2.4, and
Beautiful.
Actually that 2.4 would actually run almost 3 years. I built in a cushion. I know enough to know that I won't know a few things and I'll miss a few things and things will go rad and hurricanes will happen. So I think that makes us pretty safe.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely the right answer. We definitely like to hear that, yeah, you've got 18 to 24 months planned, because all too often people will come out for financing and they'll say, yep, the 2.4, that'll last me 6 months. And then I have to go back to the pool and go again without realizing the time demands on the C-suite and all the executives to go out and actually engage the financing process is quite demanding. And so, if you can focus more on your business than on the fundraising, that's a good thing.
Well, the beauty too is that that's not the only income stream. There's 3,380 people waiting. And so, we open them up, they'll sustain us even further. And I don't see us, there's a scenario that plays out that Series A isn't even necessary to give an exit to the 2.4.
No, and that's fantastic. Though certainly if you're able to get economies of scale by hitting those higher numbers, and if that Series A facilitates that, then I think that would be a very big value add. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the Series A does something wonderful for our valuation too, per share valuation. It just kind of leaps forward, and
Absolutely.
I'm excited to work with the folks that we've worked with. I've got another slide that talks about them, but I'll hold that close to the chest. That's for meeting number 2.
Well, we may have to talk afterwards anyways. And so for the
Okay.
3,800, or sorry, I might be getting that number wrong. I think you said you have 3,800 customers that have effectively pre-ordered. So when do you anticipate being able to give them the product that they have pre-purchased?
They actually haven't given us a penny. They have
Okay.
signed up.
Okay.
We made them send us one of our Edna tokens back, and that gave them a place at the restaurant. And we said,
Gotcha.
you've got a reservation, we'll take you in order. And thank you for wanting to come have some turkey dinner. Yeah, they've expressed desire. Now, how
Right.
many we convert, the number that we can convert, we don't know, but we do know that our price has significantly fallen since that reservation line was opened up. So hopefully that means that they see a better price because, as we all know, genetic sequencing is costing less every day. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Okay, I'd like to give Mike a
Yeah.
chance to
Yeah, please.
ask any questions he might have and give any guidance or take-home message. I'm going to target the end of the formal program at 1:15. So, Mike, I hope that gives you enough time.
Sure, six minutes is fine. So I'll stay away from the financial questions because Kimberly did a great job covering those, and Greg, it was really clear in your responses. I'll focus maybe a little more on the technical side. I noticed Ben in the chat room had asked a question about whether you considered Illumina sequencers. And I had a similar question along the lines of PacBio and Oxford Nanopore technology are less established. And I know you are very keen on the quality that you're providing in your testing. I'm wondering if you've either been able to evaluate those systems, and if so, what are you seeing in terms of reliability, quality, et cetera? How would it compare to an Illumina system, recognizing the two sets are very different technologies, of course, but Illumina is so well established, their quality is quite high. Where do you see the other two systems, and how are you growing with them, I guess, is my core question.
That's a great question. I'm gonna refer back to the ARC investment group. We spoke of them. Sorry about this.
That's okay.
Probably shouldn't need to do this, but I want to point out these people that published ARC Investment Management LLC. They had $1 billion in Illumina that they pulled this year. They dumped $1 billion of Illumina stock, and they did it because, in their estimation, and these are some terrifically smart investors, this fund has done insane in biotech and in crypto and other areas. It's a very large, well-recognized fund. They pulled $1 billion out of Illumina, and they're putting it back into places like PacBio and Oxford Nanopore. And the reason, they stated, is that Illumina is not keeping pace with the advances possible. So I understand that it's the one everybody's known about for, and Illumina's led the pack for decades and been the go-to technology, but why would ARC dump $1 billion of their stock and then reinvest it in competitors? So I think hopefully that's an answer for you. I also happen to know that the technology that Oxford Nanopore is delivering is much more sustainable. When you have to go out and buy spend millions on an Illumina machine, and none of the technology is in the flow cell. And Oxford Nanopore and PacBio are exactly reverse. Their technology is in the disposable. So every time they upgrade, what they're upgrading is their flow cells, not the big box. And that makes sense because look at the pace of the advancement of this technology that's getting better and better and cheaper and cheaper. And we don't want to be tied to a bunch of capital equipment costs that we have to go repay every 2 years. So I saw those two tools as really projected into the future, and Illumina's kind of been, forgive me for saying this, guys, they've been sitting on their heels.
No, it's a fair comment, and something that happens as companies mature, and particularly companies that are anchored around either a single drug technology or a single molecular technology in this case. So completely understand it. The one piece of advice I'd offer, we set up a company that spun out of University of Cambridge, Inivata, that was actually in the news this morning. They were just acquired by NeoGenomics. I was the founding CEO, and we had some interesting challenges when we began to use our Illumina systems in setting up here in Research Triangle Park, where I'm based in the US, to go to market with a CLIA strategy. And so I would encourage you, as you get going and work with those people that are going to help you set up the CLIA lab, make sure there's a really robust comparison between probably a gold standard, which arguably today Illumina is, even with all the faults you point out, and the newcomers, which I agree with you completely, have disruptive technology that may change or should change the pricing dynamics in the sequencing market, which is critical to successfully executing on your model. So I completely endorse the way you're approaching it, and would only advise that you carefully test it out with real samples, real data, and see what the data tells you, just to make sure before you start offering it that everything is as you expect.
That's great advice. And you know, I think I'm going to have to agree with you. I was going to, I probably need to relook at the numbers of what I call the freebies, where we could do double submissions. And now that you put it that way, I see no reason why we shouldn't pay to have a sample processed by an Illumina lab and just compare those results. That's so easy. It's such a no-brainer that
It's good
when you
housekeeping.
test your data
Right?
quality. Yeah, and the researchers will want to see that we did that. You know, that would
Absolutely.
say, yes, your data is valid. You've done due diligence on your data. We like what your lab's producing. We want it. And to get them to say that, I think we're going to need to walk them there. And as you point out, Mike, that's what they're used to, Illumina data. Yeah.
Joe,
And
in
investors would look for that as well. Oh, sorry.
sorry,
Didn't
Kimberly,
mean
I was
to
just going to
interrupt.
say, in recognition of time, I won't offer any other questions or comments, but just say, Greg, you've got, I think, a fascinating opportunity here. Some things that, although I've worked in the field for many years, never would have occurred to me. You're coming at it from a different angle, and I congratulate you on what you've set up. It's really exciting, and looking forward to learning more and hearing more as you progress.
Very kind. Thank you. Thank you. We're excited.
Kimberly, any final thoughts?
Well, I was just going to say, from a due diligence perspective, the investors are certainly interested in that as well. So if you can go and get the comparative from the other lab and show why one makes more sense to put that investment into building that lab using that technology, I think that will add a lot of value as well for the investor groups as they come in along, as your company expands. But I feel like I can't really stand up to what Michael was just saying there, but you honestly do have a phenomenal product, and it's really been a pleasure and an honor to be here and with you and Joe and the rest of our team here, Jay as well, who's in the background helping us all out. And so, yes, if there's certainly any way that we can jump in and help out, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation offline with you or anyone in the audience. If there's ever any investing questions, I'm happy to help out.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so
ditto
much.
for me, Joe. Thanks.
Well, given the time, that will have to be the last word and the end of the formal Edna presentation. I want to thank Kimberly and Mike for being part of the panel. I think they did an exceptional job. I want to thank you so much for the time and effort you put in, both tonight and prepping for the meeting. Greg, I want to thank you for, I think, the best presentation I've ever seen you make. And I think it was fabulous. It was fabulous. I want to thank you for your time and effort in prepping for this as well. As promised, Greg has promised to stay on for another 20 or 30 minutes or so. If anyone has any specific blockchain technology or cryptocurrency questions, and I think you can tell by Greg's communication style, you're going to get a straight answer because that's the kind of guy he is. But given that, Jay, if we can stop recording, that would be fantastic. And anyone who wants